All right. Hello, everybody. My name's Juan. I cover a lot of the pitching with Antonelli baseball, and I'm going to let people start filling in now. But what we're going to do today, and we're going to talk pitching, and what we're going to do is really just talk about what we can do during this time, right? What can we do to get better? What can we do to throw? How can we become a better pitcher, a better thrower? So this can just be throwing in general as well for position guys as well. It doesn't just have to be all about pitching, but we're going to cover mostly pitching more than anything. But again, throwers are throwers, and the more about kind of having a program and having something set for you during this time period. And it's a very dead time period right now. There's not a lot that we can do in a group setting with teams. A lot of the things that you have to do and accomplish have to be by yourself. But more than anything, you hear my echo? I'm sorry. Can you guys hear me okay? Just let me know if you can hear me okay. Well, let's talk about routine. Let's talk about a throwing routine and a throwing program. Now, the purpose of a throwing routine and a throwing program is really just so you can recover and throw in a pattern, right? Something that can make you better, can increase your strength, can increase your arm strength, can increase your endurance. Sorry, 1 second. Hopefully that clears it up a little bit better. Sorry, something about the mic. I have this mic plugged in, but hopefully the echo is a little bit better. Let me know if it's a little bit better for you guys. But ultimately, echo's still there. Golly. Hopefully that's better. Now let's get back to, I'm going to kind of repeat myself here if you couldn't hear me over the echo. But ultimately what we want to accomplish here is really just have a routine for ourselves, have a throwing routine. And that is really scheduling yourself and to throw within the week. And some of that may have some self-awareness, right? You may need some self-awareness towards this, and you may need to have a really good understanding of where you are as a player and an athlete when we're throwing, okay, and what you need to accomplish at that time. Now, you should be reaching out to as many resources as possible during this time period, but if you're all on your own, I highly, highly recommend just going out there. If you can get 2 intentional days of throwing, worth of throwing, twice per week, 2 times per week, that's ideal during this time period. And you're going to be way ahead of the game during this time. So it's really about scheduling a routine for yourself. And that allows you to build more arm strength and sustain strength, right? At the very least, sustain the strength that you have. And then you can set your schedule up so you're recovering better in between days and in between your throwing. Okay, so number 1, for any pitcher, for any thrower, for anybody out there, is really just going to be just scheduling a routine for yourself and making sure that you get this done, that you're getting the work in, that you're getting your throws in. Because by the time that we get on the field again and we're going to have to play, you're going to have to be ready, right? It's going to be a very short window in order for you to be ready for your season if and when we start playing games in the near future. So really, it's all about that mental will. It's all about the sustainability during this time period to get your work done, regardless on whether you're by yourself or if you have a partner or your parents, whatever the case may be. And coaches, you should be reaching out to your players as well, encouraging them to get work done during this time period. Now, really, how do we get that done? And again, going back to accountability, going back to self-will, it's really all about just warming up properly from the very beginning, right? The very first step that you take onto the field, a routine not only within throwing like we just talked about, you should have a routine in terms of stretching as well, in terms of warming up your body, in terms of getting yourself ready and prepared to throw from pitch number 1 or throw number 1. Again, whether you are a pitcher or whether you are a position guy, you should be ready to throw regardless of your routine or not. So regardless of whether you have this throwing routine or not, you should always prepare to throw the baseball. Yeah, this isn't Matt. Sorry to everybody. Sorry to disappoint. But my name's Juan. I'll introduce myself again. The echo at the beginning, I apologize about that. I had a microphone hooked up, and apparently that microphone is no bueno. So my name's Juan. I handle a lot of the pitchers with an Antonelli baseball. So I'm just on here. We're going to talk pitching, and we're going to talk throwing. And I already went over just having a routine for yourself and then just accomplishing that routine and getting your routine done and getting it accomplished and finished every single day with 2 times per week of throwing. If you can throw twice a week right now, you're winning. But it's going to require more than just 2 times a week. It's going to require having an arm care program in the other 3 to 4 days. It's going to require a lot of training. It's going to require a lot of body movements and having some sort of, even if you don't have a weight room, having some sort of exercise routine that you can just get done during this time period. Now, like I said, we should be warming up our bodies in order to throw the baseball. We should not be using the baseball as a warm-up. And I hope that makes sense to everybody. Okay, because we have to, again, be ready to rock from the very first throw until the very last throw. And once you have that accomplished, this is a very good time, a very cool time to start playing around and getting things done in a very unique manner that you may not have gotten done in the past, right? Even though we're still trying to prepare for your games, even though we're still trying to prepare our bodies to perform, it's a very awesome time. I look at a guy like Marcus Stroman, for example. That dude, the way that he throws the timing off of hitters is absolutely incredible. Go and watch him pitch. I mean, he's throwing different movements at you, different timing mechanisms within his delivery. He may pause in the middle of his delivery. He may come at you with a quick pitch. He may come at you with a nice, slow pace within his delivery. But with him, it's all about throwing the hitter off, and it's all about throwing the timing off of the hitter. And this is a really cool, unique time period for any type of player to train that way, to just start fooling around with your delivery, to start trying to create more athleticism within your delivery and not just be the same old routine over and over again of having the same mechanics and making it easier for the pitcher or making it easier for the hitter, to time you up as a pitcher. It's a great, great time to start being more athletic and just throwing extra movements at you. All right, I'm going to take this time, see if we have any questions in there. How do you throw harder? From Hector. How do you throw harder? So that's a very loaded question. There's a number of different things that you can do. Now, I really, truly believe in individualism. I don't think there's like a super umbrella that you can put all throwers or pitchers under and say, hey, if we all just stay under this umbrella, it's going to work for everybody and everybody's going to throw harder, right? So the human body is custom made. It's completely different. Everybody is different, right? There are certain absolutes and there's certain universals that we may use. Like at the end of the day, we all should try to accomplish hip to shoulder separation, right? The majority of our velocity is going to come by accomplishing that movement, by accomplishing that part of the movement pattern is hip to shoulder separation. Now it's very, very difficult to accomplish that. But I think if we're going to put an umbrella on it, it's really just becoming a better athlete. The better athlete you can become, the more movements you can perform as an athlete, the better off you're going to be on the mound. Because not every mound is perfect. Not every mound is pristine. Not every situation is perfect and pristine. So having your body primed to perform in certain manners, whether it's perfect conditions or imperfect conditions, that's what's going to make you a better thrower. But mechanically speaking, again, hip to shoulder separation is huge, and just understanding the sequencing of rotating parts from the bottom all the way up through the ball within your delivery, within your body. I think that's always number one, but everybody's different. Everybody's different. You might have tight hamstrings and a tight lower back, and you can't have a good forward trunk tilt, right? So I can teach you, I can tell you, and I can really push you on, hey, we need to get a better forward trunk tilt. If you want to be extended better, your trunk has to tilt forward better. You need to be extended better. That trunk needs to be over your front foot. But at the end of the day, with tight hamstrings and a tight back, it's going to be very difficult to accomplish that move if you don't address the tight hamstrings and the tight back. I hope you're understanding all that, because everybody, like I said, everybody's custom made. One thing may make you throw harder, but if your body isn't preset or your body isn't prepared to accomplish that movement, you're not going to accomplish that movement. And I hope that made a ton of sense to you guys. Let's see, my son is having trouble keeping the ball down. How do we work on this? Again, there might be patterns in his mechanics that are prohibiting him from having the ball down. I think something simple that you can do is get 2 sticks and get a string, right? So line up a string right across the 2 sticks and just really jab them into the ground. And make sure that string is only about 1 foot to 1.5 foot off the ground. And that alone, just having that visual and having him focus on that string and trying to have him hit that string over time, hopefully the body starts understanding what it needs to do to perform that result. And I think that's kind of like the best way. I think that's the easiest way, is just creating targets. It doesn't have to be a string. If you have a fence, you can put, little circles, grab some duct tape and make a square, very low square, and just have them pound that, repeat it. Ultimately, like if he's missing high, if I were to guess, he releases the ball in a very vertical posture. So his torso is in a vertical posture at release. And that's going to be very difficult to get the ball down at that point. So, this might be, going back to hamstrings and lower back, like check if that's an issue. If we have tight hamstrings, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to have that tilt in your torso to get out extended and really work the ball down. If you figure out that your hamstrings are good and you're able to touch your toes, right? If you can touch your toes freely, just rolling out of bed, then it's probably not a hamstring issue. It may be just a release point thing. And again, just get that string. I love the string, just having strings or having different targets for him to hit that are down. That's really gonna help your son out with trying to work the ball down. Let's see what we have. Do you have any suggestions for left-handed pitchers? Well, luckily, I'm a left-handed pitcher. And I think my number one suggestion is to not be cookie cutter, right? And this applies to righties too. But as a lefty, not be cookie cutter. Don't just be a lefty with run and a break. I think those guys are a dime a dozen. Start working on things that are very difficult, right? So like back footing sliders or cutters to right-handers, like work on that. That is a deadly pitch to a right-handed hitter. If you can throw a cutter or a slider down and in on a righty, that's a super tough pitch. In your bullpens, try to work on backdoor breakers, like go away from righties and try to backdoor a breaking ball. That's another way to get better. But again, don't be cookie cutter, like be an athlete on the mound. When there's a runner on first, don't be a guy that when he lifts and looks home, he picks the first, and when he's looking at first, he goes home, right? Ensure that you're mixing up your looks, that you're mixing up your tempo and your timing and things like that. I think those are the two biggest things with left-handers, really. Like lefties with run and a breaker, and then when there's a runner on first, when I look home, I go to first. When I look at first, I go home. I think those are the two biggest cookie cutter things from lefties. So just really hone in on those two things. And if you really focus on something like that, that should make you a lot better. Let's see what we got here. What are some great drills for mastering a sinker? Okay, so this is a tough one, right? Because it really, your arm action and how you land on the mound can really help the sinker. Okay, so like if you look back at a guy like, Derek Lowe, who had a great sinker, he would land incredibly close, right? That front foot landed really, really close to his body, and he was really working across his body, but it helped his ball run during that time. But if you know your mechanics, I got a baseball here. So if we're holding a sinker, right? So I'm left-handed here. It's really just applying your pressures properly here. All right. So like when I'm holding my sinker, it's more like a two-seam look, something along those lines. This is how I would throw it. and I'm really trying to apply more pressure onto my index finger, and I'm trying to make sure that my index finger is the last thing to leave the baseball or touch the baseball as best as I possibly can. If I'm able to do that and I'm staying behind it, right? I'm staying behind the ball, meaning that it's coming out straight up this way as opposed to maybe supinating a little bit. The more you supinate, the more the ball's going to cut on you. So the more behind we can get on the baseball, and the more we can get on that index finger, the more run you're going to get on the fastball. On top of that, if you have your thumb underneath, okay, the ball's going to stay true a little bit more. The more capable we are of sliding my thumb off of it. If you look at Max Scherzer literally just tucks his thumb right underneath like that, okay, across, kind of in like a linear fashion. That ball is really going to dive on you. It's really going to sink a ton for you. So, I mean, that's really just my suggestion. Play around with your grips. But the first thing I would do would really just ensure that I have a two-seam grip. I'm staying behind the baseball, and I'm trying to get my thumb, play around with the thumb, try to get that thumb out of the way to the point where you're comfortable and you can still control it and command it. But the more that thumb is out of the way again, the more it's going to run, the more it's going to sink. The more that thumb is directly underneath, the more it's going to stay true. It might still give you some run, but it's not really going to give you any of that run. Slider talk. So I love the slider. I think the slider is, and this is actually going to be part of the conversation. I guess I can touch upon it now. So I think the slider is a harder pitch to hit than a curveball, right? A true like 12-6, let's just say, or something that starts at 11 o'clock. All right, so a slider, you can do a number of different things, but primarily that middle finger has to be on the inside part of the seam, and that's what we're going to use as leverage. So if you see the seam, right, the seam cuts in the middle, that middle finger has to be on the inside portion of the seam, and that's where the pressure point is going to be on the ball, and that's where I really want to use the leverage of that seam. It just snaps off of my finger. Now, a slider, okay, we can't supinate all the way and get truly out in front of the baseball, right? That's going to come out more of a breaking ball or a curveball type. With a slider, we're still supinating. Just think about throwing a football, right? If we're able to throw a football, get out extended, throwing a football, and then we're coming across into my glove side hip and really rip down during that portion of it, you should get that pretty decent bite on the ball. Now, the reason why I like why I like sliders over breakers, they match the plane of a fastball a lot better. So if this is a fastball and this is a slider, the slider's going to be behind, okay? The fastball keeps going, it rides the same plane, the fastball stays true, and then the slider comes off, okay? But they both ride the same tunnel, should we say? So if you envision a tunnel, they both ride the same tunnel for a longer period of time. A curveball basically is going to start at 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock on the clock, right? So if you're looking at that as a left-hander, or 1 o'clock for a right-hander. So it's going to start at 1 o'clock for a right-hander. So it's a much higher, right, on the clock. So a curveball, okay, if this is the curveball and this is the fastball, curveball's behind, it comes out of hand, the curveball is going to hump out of the pitcher's hand. So it gets out of that tunnel a lot faster than a slider. So when we're picking, like, should I throw a curveball or a slider, I would always try to train on the slider, right? Don't disregard the breaker, the curveball. It's still a good weapon to have, especially if it's good. But if you have a true 12-6 breaker, try to figure out a way to get that down on the clock so it's a little bit more linear coming into the plate and it matches the plane of a fastball a lot better. And kind of like going back to sinker, I think the most deadliest thing you can do is have four-seam sinker slider. Now you have 3 pitches, right? You have 3 pitches. I don't have third baseball, but you have 3 pitches that all start on the same plane and all stay in that same tunnel. And then within the last 10 to 15 feet, one's going to slide, one's going to sink, and then one's going to stay true, right? So that's kind of like the hardest combination, like trio of combination to hit for a hitter, because you have 3 pitch types that all look exactly the same for a very long period of time, and then they all do something different at the end. And if you can add like a changeup, now the changeup's coming down maybe a little bit or fading a little bit more because it's a little bit slower, so it's going to sink a little bit more. Now you have 4 pitches that all start in the same tunnel. One comes down and fades, one curves or slides, one stays true as your four-seamer, and then one sinks on you. It's a filthy combination, those 4 pitches. Those would be the ones I would master the most out of everything, to be honest with you. Hello, hello. Let's see. If we have any. Who you be? My name's Juan. I'm not Matt. I apologize if I disappoint anybody. Let's see. Do you think the premature collapse of the back leg for a younger pitcher is mostly due to lack of strength? That's a really freaking good question. Okay, that's James and Melissa Gallery. That's a really good question. Because it can be, right? A kid who doesn't have all of his motor skills yet and may not be at his optimal strength, right? I mean, I guess we're never really at our optimal strength, but somebody, especially a young youth pitcher who's like that, it can be an issue, right? If you're not strong enough to sustain external rotation of the back leg throughout your stride, then it's just going to collapse on you. Another one, though, right, would be if you have, and kids have this as they're going through puberty and as they're growing, they may have really weak hip abduction. And hip abduction, you got to think of your hip. Abduction is away from my body, right? So having the ability to really sit into your leg and sustain that for a long period of time, it may be difficult for a kid because of his growing. If none of that is an issue, right? If he's a good athlete relative to his age group and he's still like collapsing that backside, I would do a lot of lateral jumping with him and really like feel if he's right-handed, have him hover on his right leg. So his right leg is on the ground, and he's hovering with his left, and have him do a lateral jump and as far as he can without rotating. Okay, and have him perform that movement over and over again. That's kind of going to teach him how to sustain external rotation within his drive. I think that's the easiest way for a young kid to really grasp that movement. And if you can add resistance to it, that's even better. That's a plus. What do you think about throwing sidearm? So throwing sidearm, I still think it's great, right? It's a little wrinkle that you can have within your delivery, and I'm all for it. Right, I'm all for it. I still think you can throw sidearm and get out extended into extension and get on top of the baseball. Somebody like Masson Bumgarner. Now, a sidearm guy is probably not going to be throwing as hard as his body can. Right. I'm going to use one of our guys for an example. We have a guy on our 17U team who's basically from the side. Right, he's pretty low. He's basically from the side. And we have him on video, and I sat down and spoke to him and said, hey, we can probably throw 2 to 3 miles an hour harder than what we do if we clean up certain aspects of your arm action, but I think it's going to hinder your stuff because his stuff is ridiculous. This kid is actually going back to having 4 pitches that start on the same plane. He has 4 pitches that start on the same plane and then all do something different at the end. They all dart somewhere different. He has a slider, a sinker, a 4-seamer, and a splitter. It's an absolutely filthy combination. And all 4 pitches ride the same plane for a very, very long time, and then they all do something different at the end. So since his stuff is so good, right, relative for his age, his stuff is through the roof good, then I felt like if we cleaned up his arm action to be a little bit smoother and maybe throw a little bit harder, it may hinder his stuff. So we said, hey, let's just stick with the sidearm stuff. Right, so I'm all for it. I'm all for it. It's a little bit tougher to understand your deceleration patterns. Always make sure that we're finishing over my glove side hip. Try to ensure that my throwing arm isn't crashing against my quad or crashing up against and crossing my arms. So if this is my glove side and this is my throwing arm, if I'm coming sidearm, I'm not coming up and like crashing up against my glove side elbow. I think those are things that can hurt a sidearmer, but if you can get your glove side out of the way, follow through over your glove side hip, even when you're going a sidearmer, then that's the best way to do it. Really focus in on that. Matt has a question. Talk about how important it is to work on being a better thrower and not a better pitcher, especially in the off season. So this is something that I'm actually like huge on. And if you've been here this entire time, I've already talked about becoming a better athlete on the mound, and a lot of that has to do with working off the mound, like becoming a better athlete off of the mound. better athletes and better throwers become better pitchers, right? Once you have all the tools and once you understand movement of your body and once you have all those patterns down, it is a lot easier to get that kid to make adjustments onto the mound after the fact. You'd be really surprised with a lot of the people that we train. We don't, if they come in, let's say for example, in late October, early November to start their off season, they don't touch the mound for about 60 to 70 days. Everything is catered towards their personal development to increase their athleticism before we get on the mound. And it works. I'm telling you, everybody throws harder, everybody throws healthier, everybody throws safer. And that's my goal, right? I think the biggest thing is you should be able to throw hard with command safely. Those should be your goals as a pitcher. And to train in order to get to those goals, a lot of that happens off of the mound. A lot of that requires becoming a better thrower and really training on just throwing the baseball off of the mound. And you'd be amazed on how much that translates onto the mound once you start prepping for the season and once we start getting our pitching in on the mound, how much faster these kids are able to translate and make adjustments on the mound after that. So I love athletic throwing. We provide a bunch of different exercises and throws. I'm sure you can go through my YouTube or Matt's YouTube and you can see a number of different athletic throwing drills that we perform in the off season. You'll see they're all on flat ground. And eventually we do them on the mound and we incorporate even athletic throwing onto the mound as well. But the more athletic you can be, the better thrower you can be, the better pitcher you're going to be. Let's see. Is this Laura? No, it's not Laura. Who is this Antonelli guy? Oh, my name's Juan, and I do a lot of the pitching for Antonelli Baseball. So we're on here talking pitching, so I hopped on. Let's see, what does a game day routine look like through the day? So I'm just going to answer that as a pitcher, like what it looks like as a pitcher. So as a pitcher, you're obviously, a lot of that preparation happens even prior to that day, right? From your bullpens to what you're working on flat ground to training, a lot of that happens prior to that day. But on that particular day, it may depend on that person, that individual. So like for me in particular, I really like showing up freaking hours early and getting into the training room to prep my body to perform for that day. So that may involve stem, it may involve heat. It always involved plyo balls and stretching and some resistance stuff prior. And once that happens, it's, you kind of relax, maybe listen to some music, hop onto the field, start chucking to your catcher, get your bullpen done, and that's, really it. But I think it's huge to get to the field early. That's number one. Get to the field early and prime your body to perform prior to throwing, right? Don't just use your throwing as a warm-up. Do that prior. I have a fastball, changeup, two-seam, and a curveball. What should be the next pitch that I focus on? I would do slider. I would do a slider. It also depends on your age too. And I don't know too much about you, but with that repertoire, I would focus on a slider next and try to get a slider or a cutter. Just something that stays linear and just rides a different path as your two-seamer. So kind of mimics your two-seamer, just going the other way. Let's see, with the hitter so focused on elevating the ball, is the sinker dead? That's a really good question. You don't really see too many guys throwing sinkers nowadays, but at the same time, the guys who are throwing sinkers nowadays are also like 96 plus. Like they are pumping absolute cheese. You still see the two-seamer, but the biggest thing is that velocities are higher, and the higher the velocity, the less sink you're going to get on the ball. The more spin rate, or the higher and most efficient spin rate that you can get on your fastball, the less sink you're going to get on the ball. So I would say, like, for the time being, if you want to categorize it as dead, that's probably a very strong term, but you can definitely make the case that the sinker is quote unquote dead, right? These guys are really trying to swing slightly up and through the baseballs. People are starting to figure out the swing, and they're starting to figure out how much the ball sinks off the mound. So conversely, pitchers are trying to increase their spin rate, be more efficient with their spin, which is going to allow the ball to travel a little bit more true with less sink on it. And that's the same with even the two-seamer right now. How many pitches is too much in game arsenal? That's really just up to you. Like, it's really up to you. There really is no real answer. If anybody remembers Orlando Hernandez, El Duque, he threw for the Yankees. That guy had like 4 pitches from 5 different arm slots. So long as you can control them with command effectively and consistently, like, you should be able to use them. I don't see why not. How can I improve my curveball? So number one, look at your grip, right? And look at your middle finger. Where's your middle finger placed? And always make sure that that middle finger is on the inside part of the seam, and using the inside part of the seam as leverage to push off, right? So this is the inside part of the seam, and my middle finger wants to push off of that. Once that occurs, get to supination with the hand and feel like you're ripping that sucker down into your glove side hip. Those are really like the easiest tips I can get you. But first is grip. A lot of people screw up their grips. They don't really know where the leverage is on the baseball. Can you talk about how effective is a good low sinker or low outside changeup in a double play situation? Is there a good pitch to get ground ball for? Yeah, so sometimes you need a ground ball, right? Runner on first, maybe there's first and third, 1 out, winning runs on third. You need a ground ball somewhere, right? You need a double play. And a lot of that is going to require you to have knowledge on the hitter. Now, if you do not have knowledge on the hitter and you do not know his weaknesses, then we're going to have to miss a barrel. And pitches that move, like a sinker, a two-seamer, or a changeup, something that rides away. So if I'm a lefty throwing against a righty, two-seam changeup might be the pitches for me to throw to get that guy out and get a ground ball. If I'm facing a left-hander, maybe now I'm going more with a big loopy like curveball or something of the sort. And then vice versa, if you're righty versus lefty or righty versus righty. But working down in the zones, like, number one, and you have to really trust the grip, and you have to work on these pitches to make sure that they're moving and they have the proper sink, or they have the movement necessary to miss a barrel. Because the first thing is to miss a barrel. And I know I just talked about like efficient spin rate and good spin rate on baseballs. Sometimes it's okay. I think Zach Greinke is a very great example of this. Sometimes it's okay to not worry too much about spin rate, have an extra sink on the ball, and get a ground ball somewhere. He's a great guy to watch, Zach Greinke is, if you want to look at a guy who still works down the zone, who's looking for run and sink on his pitches and his changeup, and he's really trying to get ground balls. I think Greinke is a very, very great example of a guy. My son is 11. How can he improve his changeup? So I guess going back to grips, at 11 years old, try not to use something that's too complicated. I really like just a 3-finger changeup, okay, and a 2-seam look. So if my 2-seam is here, I'm literally just adding a 3rd finger. So I'm putting my middle finger right in the middle of these 2 seams here, and then I'm holding more of a splitter look with my index finger and ring finger. So right there, that grip right there with the thumb right underneath, this is as simple of a grip as you can possibly use. You can also run that same grip as a 4-seamer. Just try to get a 3rd finger on there and make sure that's comfortable in his hand. At 11 years old, he's probably not ready or developed enough to throw a circle change. Okay, that's a very complicated grip, or any complicated grip, but let's just say circle change because it's a very common grip, right? I am now 32. And I still don't have hands big enough to throw a comfortable, circle change. So that's, if I were to throw it, that's how I would throw it. And this is how I would kind of throw my changeup. But what I did, I elevated my index finger a little bit more, and I would throw that look. But for an 11-year-old, again, just get a 3rd finger on there somehow, some way, and just do a simple, easy grip here. And one of my favorite things for 11-year-olds or anybody in general, okay, is to do a, crow hop or shuffle twice, like double shuffle or a single shuffle. From at 11 years old, he's probably throwing at 46 to 50 foot mounds. Have him set up at about 60 feet and have him throw changeups from 60 feet. That really gives him a much better feel on what it feels like to get out and extended and throw a changeup hard. And I think once you start learning how to throw a changeup hard and start trusting that my changeup has to be thrown just like my fastball, and I'm just going to let the grip do its thing, then the better off you're going to be. So for an 11-year-old, set up 60 feet, do a little crow hop, have them throw the crap out of it, and just a nice simple grip. Let's see. Well, why these pitchers' velocity goes down after years? Because of shoulder weaknesses or legs not so strong. So, I mean, velocity can go down with age. It could go down with wear and tear. Nowadays, it's 2020. We're able to treat our bodies well, and we're able to have a great understanding on how it is to prime our bodies to perform. So you don't really see people taper off too much. I think Verlander is a very great example of somebody who maybe hit a little bit of a skid towards the end of his Tigers career, but then at the very end of his Tigers career and the beginning of his Astros career, he was able to change a couple things within his throwing delivery in order for him to find those 3 miles an hour again. Now he's bigger, he's stronger, but go check out the way Verlander threw, in year 4, 5, 6 with the Tigers, and then go check how he throws today. Specifically, look at his glove side and look what his glove side and his glove arm in particular does within his throwing actions. He's starting to understand how to peak acceleration of his throwing arm through the throwing zone and into extension and how to follow through properly. I think one of the biggest things back in the day is we didn't really have a good understanding of deceleration patterns, and we didn't have a great understanding, or we didn't have as great of an understanding of diet and workout routine and how to become a better athlete and things of that nature, that guys faded a lot faster. I don't think you're going to see guys fade as fast as they did back then in today's world. Let's see what we got here. I'm 14 years old and my max velocity is 61. Is that too slow? No, it's not too slow. 14, you're still growing. You're still getting bigger and stronger. I think you're right there. You're right there. Matt looks the same but sounds different. Yeah, I get that a lot. But this isn't Matt. Talk about the knuckle curve, how you can hold it, how it spins, and is it effective to throw against righties and lefties? So the knuckle curve, I like throwing the knuckle. I never threw the knuckle curve, but if I did, going across the seam, middle finger is going to be on the inside part of that horseshoe. So we're kind of going across there. And then I am spiking my finger in the middle of that seam. Okay, so that's how I would hold a knuckle curve. Now, from there, you're kind of just letting that knuckle do its thing, do its work. You can also, this is a lot harder, you can also wrap it like that. It's a lot tougher, at least for me. You definitely need a good size hand to throw this pitch. But once you get that accomplished and once you really supinate and get over the top of it, so much like Mike Mussina probably had the greatest knuckle curve ever, right? You want to supinate harsh and you want to get out in front of this pitch. So when it comes out, it's going to be coming out like this, kind of backwards. So if a four-seamer's coming this way, a curveball's going to be it. So this is what's going to give it the tumbling feel as it's coming to the plate and the tumbling break. Now the knuckle part, since you're kind of like almost pushing off to the side this way, but you're throwing directly out in front of you, it's going to give a very slight kind of knuckling back and forth feel to the pitch if it's really, really good, right? It's a very difficult pitch. A lot of people try to throw it with youth players because it is an easy way to start figuring out the breaking ball. So it's a nice way if you've never thrown a breaking ball before. It's a good way to start throwing a breaker because it's easier to grip, right? It's easier to hold because of that extra finger. But, I mean, the knuckle curve can be deadly if you have a really, really good one. I don't like wrapping my finger on the knuckle. Yeah, I didn't really like that right there as I was doing it. Let's see. All right, so I do have notes here. I do want to touch upon two other things. So we already talked about tunneling and knowing which pitch to throw. But I think nowadays as a player or as a coach, you should start locating your fastball based off of your breaking stuff. Okay, so for example, if we have a 12-6 or 12-6 curveball, excuse me, the high strike fastball is going to be more effective. All right, just the way it comes out of the hand. So if a breaking ball humps out of the hand, right? I get out in front, my 12-6 breaker humps out of the hand. My four-seamer, if I stay high on it, it's going to ride the same plane as that breaker. So I have a 12-6 breaker. I can throw a 12-6 breaker down for a strike. I follow up with a fastball up for a strike. That's a more effective pattern, right? And so it's something that you need to start understanding. Slider, on the other hand, slider, you can throw any fastball, right? But if you're working slider down, you can still work fastball down, right? If you go slider down, fastball up, the fastball up, it's going to be easier for the pitcher or for the hitter, excuse me, to pick that up. So really start understanding your breaking stuff, start understanding which way they move, how much hump I have on it. The more hump you have on it, the more you should live up in the zone with your fastball and really try to blow guys up inside, like up and in. I think that's prime for up and in fastball if you have a big 12-6 breaker. Now, if you have more of a slider, you can start, working down the zone. The slider matches the fastball in more area, more quadrants of the strike zone. That's why I prefer slider. But start understanding your breaking stuff. This is a great time to start understanding your breaking stuff and start being very thoughtful of how you throw and what you throw, and then what you can pattern onto your breaking stuff in order to locate your fastball there. Let's see. Any speed may cause arm pain if not fit in utilizing bad mechanics. Yeah, so going back to fitness there, that's a very good, clear statement. It kind of gets me on this tangent on a running gun. So running gun is a very popular tool nowadays to really have a good understanding and feeling on how it is to max out your body and throw a ball hard. Okay, so that's why we do the running gun most of the time. Now, running gun shouldn't be done with somebody who's not physically fit enough to throw hard. Sorry, I have a 11-month-old home. That's who's talking right now over there. But if you're not physically fit enough to sustain the forces of a running gun, if you are not mechanically sound enough to sustain the forces of a running gun, you shouldn't be doing a running gun. I think the very first time you do an assessment on a kid, you need to start understanding as a coach, is he fit and where is he mechanically? And then you base the routine kind of off of that, right? And then you try to improve him off of that assessment. Where's his fitness level and where is he mechanically? And then we're going to work from there, right? So if you are not physically fit and your mechanics aren't sequenced up or timed up properly, a running gun's going to kill you. Throwing as hard as you possibly can is going to destroy you. It's going to destroy your arm. There are a lot of sources out or resources out there that want to increase your velocity, and everybody wants to throw harder. I'm trying to word this properly. Everybody's trying to throw harder. Everybody wants to throw harder. But sometimes you got to taper back and start increasing your foundation and bettering your foundation before you start throwing harder. So yeah, you may be, let's just say you're 80 miles an hour. Yep, maybe we cap out at 80 miles an hour today, but you're going to get hurt at 80. Sometimes it's better to taper that down to 72, and let's start understanding our body and our movement pattern at 72 miles an hour and start creeping up to that 80. So now we can throw that 80 miles an hour more consistently without pain and then work from there. I hope that made sense. Let's see. Finding hidden velocity, unlocking velocity. I'll give you one huge tip, and this is the biggest thing I see with youth players. How to untap hidden velocity that's within you. Two things. Is his heel connected to the ground during his linear move? And does he follow through over his glove side? And does his glove get out of the way? So your throwing hand should be chasing your glove, but it should never connect. They should never touch each other. You wouldn't believe how many youth players cut their energy and rotation short by focusing way too much on maybe landing in a fielding position, or focusing way too much on tucking their glove side in. They start kind of throwing like this. If you start getting that glove out of the way and you start chasing your glove hand with your throwing hand, you're going to throw harder. And two, this is very difficult. We're taught our entire lives as athletes to play on the balls of our feet. We need to do this on the balls of our feet. We need to jump off the balls of our feet. We need to move on the balls of our feet. Throwing is backwards. My back foot, my drive leg foot, has to be connected into the ground. It has to be in the ground, particularly during my linear move. So really look at those two things. The initial move, which is going to be the back foot, and then the ending, how we finish. I think those two things. I've had kids, I kid you not, I've had kids that increase their fastball. This is the most. So I had a kid increase his fastball 8 miles an hour in 35 minutes because we changed those two things. No joke. And then he was a pretty decent athlete and he understood what I was talking about. He just was never taught those things. But 8 miles an hour in 35 minutes. Like, that's no joke. But the two biggest things I see is a lot of throwers and a lot of kids will throw off the ball of their foot and really not have that heel connected into the ground throughout their linear move of the delivery. And two, very, very poor follow-throughs and deceleration patterns. Too worried of either landing square in a fielding position or too worried of tucking in so harshly with their glove side. So I'm a freshman who will be a regular varsity pitcher during this quarantine. I don't want to fall behind at all. What are some good drills that I can do to sustain a strong arm? So in terms of drills, I love individualizing drills for players, okay? Outside of that, the biggest thing that you can do during this time is to throw with intent twice a week. Now, intent doesn't mean throw your colon out. Intent just means purpose. Throw with a purpose twice a week. If you're able to throw with a purpose twice a week and have a routine and have something set for that week, write something out. For these 2 days, on Monday I'm going to do X, and on Thursday I'm going to do Y. And maybe on Tuesday and Friday I do arm care. Those, like, if you can do that, I think you're going to be ahead of the game when we come back. Because when we come back, I'm willing to bet we're only going to have about a week to prepare for any type of game. So really see where you're at right now. So for example, if you're ready to throw 45 pitches at 100% today, then we need to either sustain or grow off of that. So in order to sustain that, we have to figure out a way to throw 45 times at 100% in a given day. So write something out. Don't throw 45 pitches all in a row. Like, maybe break it up into 3 sets of 15, right? With a 5-minute break in between. There are different ways of doing it. But at the end of the day, just try to figure out, how can I get 2 days of intentional throwing per weekend during this time period? And to be honest, so if you've ever gone to my YouTube, I'm trying to throw, right? I'm trying to throw. I threw a mattress up against the wall and threw against a mattress, and I put the radar gun to make sure that I was, getting some sort of work done. So sometimes you gotta get creative. If you have a net to throw into the net. Find a fence, right? If you are lucky enough to have a throwing partner during this time, throw with them. Coordinate with them to get your work in. Let's see. Throwing as hard as possible comes with responsibility. It is the kid responsible enough to stay consistent with the proper training. If not, keep them 80%. Typically, 100% actually will teach kids bad mechanics. So that's loaded, because I just don't believe in absolutes. But it's relatively correct. It's relatively correct, right? Like, if a kid can't be consistent at 100%, then obviously don't have him chuck at 100%. Really consult with him and let him know, hey, we got to stay at 80% if we're trying to be. Once a game starts, you're trying to compete, you're trying to win games, right? 100% actually will teach kids bad mechanics. That part I will slightly disagree with, depending on where we are in the year. So if it's the off season, we can work with it. If it's in season, you're right. You're 100% right. So, just to clarify between the two, that's It's tough. I just don't fall into the trap of having absolutes and treating each kid the same, right? I'm not saying that you are, but don't ever treat each kid the same way where one thing may work with one kid and one thing may not. So since we're all custom human beings, you just have to have a keen eye and develop something for that player. Whether he can sustain 100% throws or 90% throws or 80% throws or 70% throws, whatever it may be. But having that good understanding, that's probably the hardest thing as the coach, is really watching and having a good understanding and grasp of that individual and try to make him better and try to mold him into a better player. And depending on whether he's a starter or reliever, like how many times can we throw a ball 100% when we start, this, that, and the other. But I think the goal for everybody should always be to throw as hard as they can with the most command as safely as they can. Like that should always be the goal, because I don't know if it's actually ever achievable to do those three things consistently. So if we can start, just making that the goal, I think we're better off. Let's see. How fast should a ninth grade pitcher throw? Well, it depends on what level you're trying to play at, I guess, and where you are maturity-wise, physically. You may not be physical enough. You may be a late bloomer physically. So there's a lot of variables that come into that, where I've seen ninth graders throw 90 miles an hour. I've seen ninth graders throw 70 and then throw 90 2 years down the road. So it just really just depends on the individual. Let's see. See if we have any more. Take a couple more questions and then we'll sign off. By the way, Axel Rivera, I love this. I just like what you wrote. I love this. Throwing as hard as possible comes with responsibility. I might steal that. I really, really like that. Really, really like that. Are you a fan of weighted balls or just long toss? So I believe that there is a time and place for everything, right? We use weighted balls, we use plyo balls, and we long toss, right? But it just depends on the day, depends on where we are with that person, with that player. So there are a lot of variables that come into play on what we're going to do on that given day and where that athlete is at that given moment. So there really isn't something uberly structured. We have a general idea of what we want to accomplish, but it may change. It may change within the workout what we want to accomplish, depending on how the player feels and having good self-awareness on where he is at the time. So I do believe in long toss, and I do believe in weighted balls, just to put it simply. It doesn't mean that you should go out there and throw 7-ounce baseballs over and over and over again haphazardly. It also doesn't mean that you long toss 4 times a week and really try to extend out to 300 yards. There's a time and place for everything, and depending on age, height, weight, maturity, athleticism, injury history, a bunch of more and more and more I can keep piling on. All of those things come into play when you structure a routine for somebody. And goals. I mean, I ask this all the time, like, what's your goal? Let's see if I see anything else in here that I think is noteworthy. All right, guys, so I'm going to end it with this, and it's really visualization and being able to visualize during this time period, whether it's a sequence, right? I'm a lefty, I'm facing a lefty. How do I want to attack this guy? Use major leaguers. How do I want to attack Cody Bellinger, right? How do I want to attack Christian Yelich? How do I want to attack Mike Trout? And really visualize those moments. And as crazy as this sounds, I think video games are great for that. Go play Road to the Show. Not even kidding. Go play Road to the Show and be very thoughtful of pitch selection, pitch sequence, and pitch type. Not joking at all. I think the more you can start being thoughtful of those things, especially when there's no baseball on TV, If there's no baseball on TV, there's no games that we can be watching. There's no games that we can be watching live and just critique live. Either go on YouTube and find a game to watch. Like last night, I watched Game 7 of the 2001 World Series. Watched it. Loved it. Right? Go do that or go play the show. And be very thoughtful with each one, whether you're sitting and watching the game or whether you're playing the game on the PS4. Be very thoughtful. And I like the video game over watching it right now because it's a lot harder to watch the game and try to create things on your own. I think the video game aspect, you're able to create things on your own and you're able to have a good understanding of what's succeeding, what's failing. Now, you don't have a lot of control on either or, what's succeeding or what's failing, but you're able to think things through on your own. And I think even if it's wrong, I think being very, very thoughtful and mindful of what you are doing is going to help you in the long run. So go out and play some video games and go out and go on YouTube and watch something on YouTube, some games on YouTube, or when you're throwing, you're supposed to be throwing twice a week. When you're throwing, try to mimic these sequences, right? I want to throw X, Y, and Z right now because the hitter does A, B, C, right? Be very thoughtful, visualize yourself succeeding, and visualize what you want to do to certain hitters and to in certain situations with base runners on base, with guys on second and third, 1 out, infield in. Guys on first and third, winning runs on third, 1 out, I need a ground ball somewhere. What do I want to do? And start visualizing and understanding those things. So I hope you like this live stream. I'm going to go eat right now, and everybody enjoy this time. If you have any questions, drop them down into the comment section. This will be posted and I will answer them from my YouTube channel accordingly as they come up. I'll see everybody later.